Hi, everyone. It's 12:15 on the 2nd of December, 2020. This is the Joe Rosenthal Chapter USMC Combat Correspondents Association meeting. And the first Wednesday of each month, we have a guest speaker, and today's guest speaker is going to be fantastic. Her name is Gail Chatfield. She wrote a book about Marines in the Pacific in World War II. Her dad was there in the 3rd Marine Division, and Gail's had a long association with Iwo Jima veterans that we'll talk about a little bit. And she was able to interview a number of them and put them into a book called By Dammit, We're Marines: Veteran Stories of Heroism, Horror, and Humor in World War II on the Pacific Front. And unlike myself, Gail is a experienced and professional writer. I'm gonna read her bio here. She is a former opinion columnist at the North County Times in San Diego. And before that, she worked in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles for 20 years. She had positions at AFTRA, William Morris Agency, and nearly 10 years as assistant to Farrah Fawcett. And we're going to limit the number of questions on Farrah Fawcett. I met Gail when she was serving on the board of the Iwo Jima Reunion Committee down in the San Diego and Camp Pendleton area. And they coordinated the largest gatherings of Iwo Jima veterans in the country for an annual reunion in February of each year. Gail is a member of the Military Writers Association, Military Writers Society of America, American Historical Association, Southern California Writers Association, and she's an associate member of the 3rd Marine Division Association. I mentioned her father was a 3rd Division Marine in World War II. I don't know if our friend Ed on the call knew him, but he served in Bougainville, Guam, and Iwo Jima, and before the war broke out, he was serving in Iceland in the Marine Corps. Gail is also one of the founders of the Veterans Writing Group in San Diego, and she's going to introduce that group and tell us just a little bit about it. But here's Gail Chatfield, author of By Dammit, We're Marines.
Well, thank you, Tom, for inviting me to speak, and thank you to all my Zoomers that are coming in here. I'm honored. I always get a great thrill when I can talk about my Iwo Jima veterans, my little band of fathers, really. So I'm just excited about it. I've met some lovely men and lovely stories, and so many of the men that I interviewed, 52 of them that I totally interviewed, so many of them have passed away. So I'm glad I was able to keep their stories, if not for their own family history, but for anyone else who might like to share in some of their stories. And I prepared a little video, not a video, as a PowerPoint presentation that will kind of bring you through some of their little conversations that they had with me. And I hope you find it interesting. And Bob, if you want to go onto the screen share, we can start right now if you like. Okay. Is it good to go? Okay. Let's see if this works.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, slideshow. Let me just get from slideshow. From beginning. Here we go. Okay, this should go large. I don't know why it's not going large. There we go. Okay, that's much better. This is my my book, the cover of my book. So if you see it any place, you'll know what this is. The reason I wrote this book, and I didn't start out to write a book. I just wanted to submit a story to the newspaper, a little feature article about the Marines that I had met through my associations with the Iwo Jima Committee. And a feature article is about 1,500 words, or maybe 2,000 words. And after I'd interviewed some men, I thought, I cannot condense their story down to just a couple of quotes and maybe a little background information. I don't think it did their story any good, and I don't think it did the story for the battles in the Pacific. So my naivete, why don't I just put these stories in a book? I figured if I like these stories, then maybe somebody else might like them as well. So I went out to interview as many of the Iwo Jima veterans as I could. It was a labor of love for me because of my father. And this is a picture of my father, a young kid. Look at his ties all askew. I don't know, but this was when he was in Iceland. And this is kind of a fun fact. Not many Marines know about this, but in 1941, his unit volunteered to go to Iceland to relieve the British who had to go to Europe to fight the Germans. And if you notice on his sleeve, there's it's a white polar bear. It looks just like a blotch, but it's a white polar bear standing on a little ice floe there. Well, the British, that was their trademark, that was their patch. So they gave it to the Marines to honor the Marines and thank them. Now, my dad's patch was one of the first ones. As the Marines had been there for longer periods of time, they thought that this polar bear just standing on an ice floe looked a little timid. And so they started making the patch with the polar bear with his paws up and looking more aggressive, more like a Marine as opposed to just a little, cowering polar bear, even though I think polar bears standing or just walking around are seriously dangerous. But anyway, that was him. And he died when I was 15, never shared a story, didn't talk to my mother about his time in the military, certainly wouldn't have talked to me and my sisters. And I knew nothing about anything that he did. I was more interested at that time as a teenager in the Beatles invasion, not Bougainville invasion. But you grow older and you get wiser. And, there was a hunger in me to find out what he might have experienced. I know he must have done something kind of important because there was a commendation on the wall, something about blah, 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 mortars, blah, blah, blah. You're just a kid. You read this stuff and don't think anything of it. Well, I've learned a lot since then. So I had this hunger to find out more, and that led me to interview the different Marines that I interviewed. But I'd like to start just to kind of get some background on Iwo Jima. Just some interesting facts. It's about 700 miles from Tokyo, as you can see on the map here. And it's considered a prefecture or a suburb of Tokyo. It's kind of the Garden Gate. I mean, this is Japanese home territory, and this was pretty darn close to Japan. You can see where Guam and Saipan and all the other islands that the Americans had captured until they got to Iwo Jima. It's shaped like a pork chop, I'm told, and on one end is a volcano, a non-spewing volcano, just a dead volcano, 550 feet. And then there's the landing beaches right underneath the volcano, and then there's some craggy mountain and crevices and canyons up at the other end. It's 8 square miles, which is about the size of Coronado Island, if any of you are familiar with San Diego and North Island Naval Air Station. So it's not that big. The Japanese use it as an early warning system for planes coming from Saipan and Guam, American bombers that would go and bomb Japan mainland. It was an early warning station, and they would alert Tokyo that bombers were on their way, and also had 2 airports and a third one being built that would have their bombers there, the Japanese bombers who would intercept the planes going to Japan. So it was important for both the Americans and the Japanese. It was 11 miles of caves underneath the island, with another 6 that were under construction, but the Americans found 11 miles on this 8 square mile island of caves and tunnels and crevices. There were 60,000 Marines on the island. And with the Navy and the Air Corps, they figure at some point there was 100,000 Americans on this little 8 square mile island. The Japanese force was 21 to 23,000. They don't know. There's still not a good estimate. And as we know, there were 6,800 plus Americans that died, about 1,000 of the Navy and about 37 Army. There's still about 199 Americans that are missing, and bodies have not been found yet. The Battle of Iwo Jima had the most Medal of Honors awarded, 27. Half of those were posthumously, and about a third of all the Medals of Honors that were given to the Marines in World War II. So it was a very big battle, and it is part of Marine Corps history and legacy, and just an important battle symbolically and for them. It was called one of my veterans described the battle as a perfect battlefield, a perfect battle on a perfect battlefield. There was no collateral damage because there was nothing there, no buildings, no offices, no factories, nothing. There were no civilians. It was just strictly fighting man against fighting man. And he could not see any other battle during the war, another time, or maybe even in the future, that would ever happen again. Let me see if there's any other fun facts I wanted to share. If not, I'll go on with the presentation. Oh, here's something. Here's kind of a fun fact. In 1949, 2 of the last Japanese survivors on the island turned themselves in. They were well fed, they had clean uniforms and fully functioning weapons. And they only turned themselves in because they had seen a Stars and Stripes magazine, and it showed a picture of the American troops celebrating New Year's Eve in Tokyo, and they knew the war was over. Just an incredible, incredible story. But I would like the men to tell their story here. And so I have put together some photographs, some from the archives, some from actually the veterans themselves, that will kind of supplement the words that they say. And forgive me, I wish I had a voice like James Earl Jones. I think that would give so much more credence to their words, but I don't. And it's not so much how it's said, but actually what they say. And they're full of just wisdom, and I'd like to share that with you now. I was 18 years old, bashful, wouldn't even talk to a woman, never smoked, never drank. 6 months in the Marines, and I'm smoking, drinking, and chasing women. Corporal Bob Mo Mueller, United States Marine Corps. My first pay in boot camp was a $20 bill. It was the first $20 bill I ever owned, and I was 18 years old. I didn't have it more than a day or so and felt I had to send it home. My mother was ever so grateful. While overseas in combat, I was promoted to PFC, then corporal, and got a few bucks more. When I made sharpshooter, that was $3 more a month and a few more dollars I'd send home. I didn't need it, especially overseas. On Iwo Jima, I figured out most of us privates, PFCs, were fighting for $1.53 a day. Sergeant Major Mike Merbosh, USMC, retired. The battle for Bougainville, a long and bitter jungle campaign, is finally winding down, or so the rumors are saying. The latest hot scoop being the Army will relieve us in a few days. Beautiful news, to put it mildly, and having just been on patrol, we figure we have it made, and with a little luck, we should be able to ride it out. Then, just as we had the whole thing planned out, in our dreams, of course, orders come down from my platoon to get our gear on and prepare to move out. Our protest stations that we had just been on patrol bring the usual response, the sergeant's retort being something like, "Tell it to the chaplain," only not in those exact words. This little outing is to be no run-of-the-mill patrol, but a serious effort to locate a rumored large enemy force building up for a counterattack against our lines. Taking a moment to put this little tale into some sort of perspective, the jungle and its many miseries has taken considerable toll on us foot sloggers. We are tired, beat down is more like it, and weary of the elements, the jungle itself, the mosquitoes and flies, the insects of all kind, the cotton mouth of thirst, the never knowing what will happen next and whether you will be around to see it. More or less constant fear over time simply grinds one down. Our dungarees are tattered and torn by almost 2 months of rain, swamp, and hard use. And if all that not be enough, we are sick with one thing or another most of the time, and not helped at all by an almost constant state of exhaustion. We haven't been eating too well either. A real meal is just a distant memory. Still in all, we hold on to the old gyrene feeling of camaraderie, along with the spirit, though sorely tested, of doing what has to be done, and a little, oh, in truth, a hell of a lot of griping and cursing notwithstanding. Private William Swanson, United States Marine Corps. I don't know if it was because I was 18, but I don't remember anyone who was scared while en route to Iwo. On the way there, you don't think about it. But on the last night, they start issuing ammunition and tell you what to put in your packs and how to square it away. The last night, you start getting a little anxious because it comes down to the real thing. On Saipan, about 4 or 5 nights before, they came around and said if we have any letters to write, now is the time to do it because this is the last mail drop. That's when it starts hitting home. Private Walter Ulrich, United States Marine Corps. The worst thing I remember was just before we hit the island, they put DDT on us. We had to stand there and they covered our whole body with that crap. I don't care what it was, that DDT killed anything. Iwo Jima was the only place we got DDT. We had never gotten it before. Stupid idea. Hospital Apprentice, 2nd Class, Herman Doc Raybeck, United States Navy. I always served Holy Communion before an invasion and had announced ahead of time that if anyone wished to talk about baptism, I'd be available. We had quite a few baptisms. They were just young kids and they were scared. I wouldn't give much credence if they weren't. If they were veterans and had been through a battle before, they knew what to expect. If they were recruits who had just been through amphibious training, they were scared and so were we. We didn't know what to expect. When those guys went down those rope ladders to their boats early in the morning, I was always there with them. Lieutenant Commander John D. Wolf, Chaplain, United States Navy, Reserve, retired. The one thing that sticks in my mind is how seasick I was, as well as half the other men when we hit the beach in our landing craft. Because of the combat situation on the beach, they kept us afloat for 5 hours in rough seas in a ready position for immediate commitment. The situation was so intense on the beach, they decided not to land us and brought us back on the ships where we re-embarked. The second day, due to the combat situation, we repeated the same thing. 5 hours in rough seas, again getting very seasick. I've never been that seasick in my life and never since. It was so miserable, all I wanted to do was to get off the landing craft, even if that meant landing on Iwo Jima. Lieutenant Colonel Russell Silverthorne, United States Marine Corps, retired. If you ever see pictures of the landing, you'll see guys with faces and hands painted white like ghosts. That's us. The underwater demolition teams found that the Japanese had buried a lot of gasoline tanks that would ignite when the landing forces made it there. So we had to fireproof our faces and hands to go through it. You had to keep moving because the first wave was already there and was heading to the other side. So we had to be right behind them to reinforce them. Our A Company landed at 9:03 with 250 officers and men. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, we were down to 75. Corporal John Almergares, United States Marine Corps. The corpsman bandaged me up and gave me a shot of morphine, I guess. After that, I kept leading my squad to the airfield. I thought, you don't lay on the beach. You move in if you don't want to get killed. If you lay on the beach, they're going to kill you. If you move inland, they have a chance to kill you. Sergeant Major Joe Krakowski, United States Marine Corps, retired. Sorry. The regiment set up a little CP on the beach, and I opened a small switchboard there. They moved up and I stayed in the rear. I was there all night by myself on the beach. I could hear this clank, clank, clank. The Japs were cranking a gun out of the cave over on Suribachi and fired into the bay towards all the ships that were out there. The next morning, a tank pulled up behind me and got in a firefight with the Japs over on Suribachi, who started shooting back. Then the Navy bombers came in and dropped bombs. I thought, my God, if I ever get out of here, I'll be lucky. I was 18 years old and frightened to death. Master Sergeant Bill Bahana, USMC, retired. I remember it was raining the second day. There were some wrecked Japanese aircraft right up along the edge of the airfield. The sergeant came along and said, you, and you. We got snipers in the planes. Let's go. We had our ponchos on and had stayed relatively dry. We took off our ponchos, threw on our equipment, grabbed our rifles, and jumped out of the holes and went. Hold up, he says. They got him. You can all go back in your holes. We were soaking wet now. We had to throw our ponchos back on. It was the most miserable night in my life to that point. I froze. I shivered all night. I even told the guy in the hole with me that I'm not scared. I'm just freezing. Private Walter Ulrich, USMC. I didn't see the flag going up. I was busy trying to do my job along the front lines. We were about 2 miles north by that time when my runner looked back towards Suribachi. What's that up on Suribachi? He asked. When I looked, I saw a flag, but at that distance, we couldn't be sure whether it was a Jap flag or an American or what. I got my binoculars out of the case, and when I focused in and saw the colors rippling in the breeze, I told them it was the second most beautiful sight I had ever seen in my life. The most beautiful sight was my bride on our wedding day. It didn't get any prettier than that. Colonel James Shelton Scales, USMC Reserves, retired. It wasn't what we expected at all. Because we were bombing, we blew that island apart, so we thought. There was one thing the Japanese always made a mistake about. They'd let us land before they opened up on us. And once we are on land, we aren't going to leave. Acting Sergeant John Holy, United States Marine Corps. The black sand was so fine that typical foxholes could not be dug. Most cover was provided by craters caused by the constant fire of large mortars from higher ground. I think it was the second day there when a Marine sergeant and a war dog were walking by. A barrage came in and he said, "Can I join you?" "Sure, come on down," I said. It turns out that he was one of my drill instructors at Paris Islands when I was at boot camp. We certainly had a different relationship in the foxhole than we did at boot camp. Second Lieutenant Ed Cavallini, United States Marine Corps. The artillery barrage that the Japanese had put down on us was accurate and heavy. They had been there for so many years and they had every place pinpointed. Their riflemen were expert shooters. Many Marines got shot in the head. After the first day, we made a little bit of progress. The main way to move was to put out an artillery barrage of our own and try to get out underneath it and advance. Those Marines just kept inching forward in spite of the heavy casualties. You just kept going. You think about the danger, you can't help think about it. But you have a job to do and you just keep moving forward. Lieutenant Colonel Paul McClellan, United States Marine Corps, retired. We sat around shooting the breeze and eating a cold can of hash while getting ready to move out. Some guys mentioned that things were getting kind of tough back in the States with food shortages. The rumor is that all the good stuff is going to the troops overseas, he says. We looked at each other, excuse me, we looked at each other and tried to figure out what the good stuff tasted like. We hadn't had any good stuff in a long, long time. Corporal William Swanson, United States Marine Corps. We went ashore as a graves registration unit, and the first burials were done about 3 days later. We then had burials every day right up until our division left to go back to Maui. With each burial, we had 4 Marines, 2 at the head and 2 at the body of each grave, and they knelt while I said the committal service. Then we would move on to the next one because we would usually have a number of burials at one time. 20 or 30 or 40, maybe more. The largest number we ever had in one day was 238. And of course, that meant several services during the day. We did have a very unusual situation once. The corpsmen were supposed to go around to check each body and to write a death report to indicate the cause of death. One corpsman was making his rounds one day and he heard a fellow moaning. The minute he heard that, he checked him and found the man was still alive. He was taken immediately to the first aid station at the beach and taken out to the ship as quickly as possible and was saved. I don't remember the fellow's name, but I heard he later became a dentist in Houston. Lieutenant J.G. Gage Hodling, Chaplain, United States Navy, Reserves. There's a way you get men to do the things that are very difficult to do, and I think it came down to a very basic thing, camaraderie. The guy next to you knows you're going to be there, and you know damn well he's going to be there, and it really isn't much beyond that. You don't want to let the other guys down, and you don't want to be the first man to let the Marine Corps down. The rest of it, mom, apple pie, country, lost a long time ago. Our world was just us. It's kind of hard to think you could really separate yourself from the rest of the world that way, but you can, particularly for those of us who had been out there a couple of years. The other world is out there, but it's not your world anymore. You wish to hell you were there, but you just look at things differently. Corporal William Swanson, United States Marine Corps. The only unusual thing about me that I mention as I get older was that I made D-Day in Normandy and D-Day in Iwo Jima. Not that I volunteered, but it's quite unusual for a guy to be attached with the 4th Marines and to have done both. In France, I had an armband with a red cross on it. On Iwo, I didn't, or I would have been a target. I carried a weapon on Iwo from the day I landed until the day I left. In Europe, I didn't have a weapon. 2 different theaters of war. Even though I had been through Normandy, I didn't do any of that personal stuff. On Iwo, I got educated pretty quick and grew up pretty quick. I had to do it all. Suture, treat sucking chest wounds, and amputate, as another corpsman who were smarter than me told me what to do. I was 19 years old. I was educated in units of plasma. I had so many styrets of morphine, so much this, so much that, and a lot of battle dressings, sulfabinamide. We carried stuff that's probably obsolete today. Medically, they don't do anymore. Pharmacists made 2nd class Maurice Lib La Liberté, United States Navy. I shot one Japanese while I was on guard duty. He came down out of the mountain at night. They had no food or nothing to eat and starving to death. I told him to halt, but he didn't, so I had no option but to shoot him. I always felt kind of bad about that because he was just starving to death. But we knew you can't play pretty with the enemy because they'd have some kind of trick up their sleeve, bomb us or something if we did anything like that. Tech Sergeant Earl Davis. We were up at a place called Turkey Knob when B Company was trying to knock out this gigantic blockhouse. When we first saw the B-29 make its crash landing at Iwo. That was more meaningful to us than the flag raising because we suddenly saw light of day while we were there. The plane was damaged, but it was repaired and flew again, saved the whole crew. 2nd Lieutenant Jack Bradford, United States Marine Corps. The 22 guys left in my company dug in on a little rise at the edge of the airfield. We were cut off from any other outfit and were by ourselves. I had 1 magazine of ammunition left. I laid my fighting knife in front of me and said a prayer and got ready to go down fighting. I know that every man in that group would have fought to their death. PFC Ken Stevens, United States Marine Corps. Then I got the dysentery. It was so filthy over there, it's a wonder everybody didn't get sick. I never had it before. I know it's the filth. I know that. I was there 27 days when I got the dysentery. That's what I thought it was, but they said, you got mental fatigue. Whatever the hell that is. PFC Merrill L. Miller, USMC. As far as washing, I actually didn't wash once on Iwo. Didn't change my socks, didn't change my underwear, didn't change a bloody thing. Never even dabbed my eyes. never washed my mouth, never shaved. We used to see artillery guys or headquarters people back on the beach, and they're taking showers and have their helmet full of water. I didn't use 1 ounce of water for any hygienic purposes, but we all smelled the same, so no problem. To us, we looked fine. If I looked at the other guy and he had a beard and didn't smell too good, well, I couldn't smell him anyway. No matter how he looked, I figured we all must look the same. Private Walter Ulrich. This is perhaps the grimmest and surely the holiest task we have faced since D-Day. Here before us lies the body of comrades and friends, men who until yesterday or last week laughed with us, joked with us, trained with us. Men who were on the same ships with us and went over the sides with us as we prepared to hit the beaches of this island. Men who fought with us and feared with us. Now they lie here silently in this sacred soil, and we gather to consecrate this earth in their memory. It is not easy to do so. Some of us have buried our closest friends here. We saw these men killed before our very eyes. Any one of us might have died in their places. Indeed, some of us are alive and breathing at this very moment only because men who lie here beneath us had the courage and strength to give their lives for ours. To speak in memory of such men as these is not easy. Of these too, it can be said with utter truth. The world will little note or long remember of what we say here. It can never forget what they did here. Rabbi Roland Gittleson, United States Navy. Of the 240 Marines of C Company who landed on Iwo Jima on D-Day, only 31 of us survived. Half of us were the walking wounded, so the other half is pretty lucky. We didn't have our first hot meal until we got aboard ship. We lost a lot of weight, our stomachs shrunk, and we were breaking out with little infections because of the embedded ash. But that was nothing. There's always humor in battle. Coming up that cargo net was really tough because we were so weak. Sailors helped the Marines the last few feet, grabbing them by the arm to get them over the railing. A sailor got me by the arms and I said, "Get away from me, Swabby. I made it this far. I will do it on my own. I want to do it on my own. By damn it, we're Marines." Sergeant Major Mike Mervosh, USMC, retired. The first thing that I did back on Guam was contact my brother Jim at the 5th Field Depot. It was a great and somewhat tearful reunion. He was able to get word back to Mom and Dad that I had made it back from Iwo Jima. Of course, I wrote them, but my mail was censored and it took longer to get on its way. But being an officer, Jim's mail was not censored. Our parents said they would be worried to death with both of us in the Marines, and we needed to set up a code of some kind so they knew where we were. We devised a code where the last letter in the sentence would be the first letter of our location. We spelt out Guam so our parents knew we were safe and together on Guam. PSC Nicholas White, United States Marine Corps. The saddest part was when I came home and went to visit my friend Bill's mother. She was living in Michigan, I believe, and she had word that her son was killed. I hitchhiked from San Francisco back there because I didn't have any money. I kept my uniform on so I could get a ride. It was a warm day in September. She was in her kitchen and looked out and saw this Marine in uniform. When I knocked on the door, the poor thing almost fainted because she probably thought I was her son. There were a lot of mistakes during the war, and maybe she thought he didn't die. That was really sad for me. All she wanted to know was what his last words were, but I couldn't tell her because it was a swear word. I just couldn't tell her that. I told her that he died peacefully, which he really didn't. But I didn't want to worry her all the more because if you tell her he was in agony, then the poor thing will live the rest of her life thinking about that. We wrote to each other for a long, long time. I'm sure Bill would have done the same thing for me. Private Gus Anistol, United States Marine Corps. Our plane landed 3 times on Iwo Jima. Our first emergency landing was after a raid over Tokyo. We knew we weren't going to make it back to Saipan. Iwo was about halfway between, so the pilot decided to go into Iwo. I owe my being alive to the Marines who took Iwo. In a way, we repaid the Marines. With the bombing that we did of Japan, they didn't have to invade it. The Marines on Iwo Jima took a terrible licking. It's a terrible price to pay for 8 square miles. Staff Sergeant Victor Chalker, U.S. Army Air Corps. I went back to Iwo in 1997. It was my first time back. I couldn't recognize it with all the foliage. It was so well cultivated. Nature does a wonderful job recovering from battles. When I got off the plane, I did go down on bended knee. For some fellas, it was very emotional. Corporal Lyle Ratliff, United States Marine Corps. The Iwo Jima Association of Japan works with me and others to prepare reunions of honors. It's a very touching service for the U.S. survivors and for the Japanese. I say this on Iwo, and I say it every year, and I will say it next March at the Reunion of Honor. Those of us here in 1945 had nothing to do with why we were here. We were here because our national leaders and our military leaders said go and do it. So we came and we did it. One side won and the other side lost. And here we are now to celebrate the men who gave their lives in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Lieutenant General Lawrence Snowden, United States Marine Corps, retired. That is the bulk of the presentation with the veterans talking. I've added one more slide here, a couple more slides actually, that mean a lot to me. And I found these, as I say, I knew nothing about my father's military career, anything, but I did find this photo of him. And that's my dad right there. And that's General Erskine, and that's General Craig of the 3rd Marine Division. And this was taken at Camp Pendleton in 1950 when they started the 3rd Marine Association in the Southern California area. And my dad was one of the original, what do they call it, founding members of the association. And I just think for just a poor boy from Arkansas to have seen what he did, and then to be in the presence of generals, it just did my heart well. Anyway, that's my presentation. If you're interested in my book, it is available on Amazon. If you would like a nice signed copy, I'd be happy to send one to you. There's my information. Just send me a check for $15. I'll pay for the postage to get it to you. I'm just so pleased when people do want to find out more about these Iwo Jima veterans, and there's a lot more stories in there. But through their stories, it will tell the battle. It's not a history book. It is more of a under the helmet look at that battle. Anyway, do we want to open it up to questions, or is there anybody have any questions or something they'd like to comment? Ed, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, you need to stop sharing.
Stop share, okay.
Up top, red.
There we go.
Okay, I need to unmute everybody. Hold on.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gail. That was awesome, and a great way to present the words of the Marines and the work that you did capturing those words. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
I have lots of questions. Does anybody else have a question that would like to go first?
Yes.
Okay, PT, Brent.
I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., where it's very cold. And Gail, that whole thing was great, but most of all, the title. The title is just very Marine and sums it up. I've been to Iwo twice, and I can't find anything in your presentation wasn't right on target, because I know that Tom Graves and Bob Benson were there during the battle.
Exactly.
I put in there because Mike Mervosh is the one who gave me the title, because every time I'd say, well, how could you just keep going? Well, by damn it, we're Marines, as if I should have even questioned the ability of the Marines. But the title has gotten me into trouble a couple of times. I was invited to go back to Branson, and they were having a panel at one of the local colleges there to talk to them about veterans and wars and things like this, and they invited me to be there. But then they withdrew their offer because they thought that these college students might be offended by the word "damn it" or something.
Well, this is, that's too bad. Let me tell you, first of all, I have a play I sponsored, a patriotic play in Branson. Get on me later and I'll set up some tickets. But, anybody gives you a grief over there, tell me you have 2 words for them and it isn't happy birthday. Shame on you for knowing.
My daughters who were the same age as who were in college, she said, "Oh, listen, college students have heard much worse words than that," and I knew that. But you know, that was their thing. They missed out. That's all I can say. They missed out.
Right. You're right. Anyone else with a question for Gail? Or comment on the battle?
I hope we can hear from Ed Cavallini. Ed, you wanna talk to us a little bit here?
Yeah, take it off mute.
Ed told me earlier he preferred to just listen to Gail's presentation. So I'm gonna get him to talk with us, maybe make his own presentation another time. Of course, Ed, if you've changed your mind, you're welcome to question or add whatever you'd like. But
I would like to say that I was really impressed by the photos that Gail showed during her presentation. It's things I hadn't seen before and brought back a lot of memories. Thank you, Gail.
Oh, well, thank you. As I say, some of the photos were from the veterans themselves, but the other photos were classified photos at the time. They were given to a friend of mine, an Iwo Jima veteran, is Russell Silverthorne. That name may sound familiar. His father was General Silverthorne, who was the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps back in the 50s, I believe. But after the battle, the Marine Corps presented General Silverthorne these volumes of books that were classified photos, and there's some, some good ones in there, and there's some real, scary, frightening ones in there as well. Anyway, they've been declassified, and so I was very pleased that he let me use those photographs because I think so many of them are so spot on with what
I'd like to, you're talking about General Vandergrift? You're talking about General Vandergrift?
No, I don't. I know who he is, but his son wasn't it Archie that was on Iwo Jima, his son Archie? No, wait, Ed, you knew Archie Vandergrift, didn't you?
Well, I have a little story if you got a moment.
Yeah.
After I was wounded, I was laying on the beach waiting to go get off the island, and they took me in a small landing craft out to an LST. It was acting like a big ward where they took the wounded guys to get them off the beach, also to wait for hospital ships. And when I get down laying in a cot or a stretcher, I don't even remember what it was. We're all lined up there, and right next to me was my battalion commander, who was Archie Vandergrift, who was the commandant's son. And the thing that impressed me most, we started chatting naturally, is that I realized I was really impressed by him when I joined the division, tough China Marine. And the thing he kept saying, "Gee, I hope my folks aren't worried about me too much." And that's when I finally realized that he's a human being just like the rest of us.
That's right.
Ed's story, and Ed has a fascinating story. He's got some real good adventures in there. He has a chapter in my book. I enjoyed interviewing Ed so many years ago. I remember that story now.
Anyone else have a question for Gail?
I do, Tom.
Okay, Ray.
I've been to Iwo 5 times and I edited the spearhead for the 5th Marine Division. It was a fantastic presentation. And I do have a question about your father. Did you know Clarence Ray?
No.
Lived a little north of LA, but he was John Bassilone's best friend, had the same tattoo on his shoulder. I interviewed him several years ago. But he was, a lot of people don't know this thing about being in Iceland. He was in Iceland before going to the Pacific as well. And a lot of people don't realize that what they were doing up there. And I just thought that was interesting that your father was there.
Huh, yeah, who knew? It was a bit of information I didn't know until I did.
I didn't either until I talked to Clarence.
Yeah.
Gail, Could you tell us just a little something about the Veterans Writing Group and how you came to start that and
Sure.
what it's for and what are they doing today?
Well, after I interviewed all these other men, I thought there was a great opportunity for veterans to share their stories, and if not for their own families, maybe for publications. And so I worked with a retired Marine to set up the Veterans Writing Group up in Oceanside. I think this was back in 2009 that it started, so it's still been going strong. We now have a woman Marine who's leading a women's Veterans Writing Group, because it tended to be more men that came out than women, and lots of Vietnam veterans, and that's a whole other area that has stories that need to be told. But one of when you're leading a group of writers, you give them a writing prompt sometimes so they can kind of get their juices flowing and write. And so one of them that I gave them was, tell me about a time that you were away for the holidays, for Christmas, away from your family. And the stories that came back were really, really sensational, and prose, poems, very honest work. So we put those together and we actually did a book. Can you see Away for the Holidays here? There's a collection of 30 stories. We put it on Amazon, but there's just some great little stories in there. And the guys were so enthusiastic about that they said, well, no, let's do another book. So they did a second book, which is Listen Up, things I learned from the military. And it's just a lot of life lessons, a lot of poems, just an incredible thing. The third book that they've done is Stories That Must Be Told. And the books are getting thicker and thicker as there's more participants. But stories about that they've just kept inside them all these years, but they need to be told, they need to be shared. So we've done a third book. They now hold Zoom meetings. I'm not as actively involved as I was. I've had some issues, so I haven't been able to participate as much, but they're still growing strong. And I have a slide that has their information, but it's easy. Just go veteranswritinggroup.org. And since now you're at Zoom, you can kind of log in from any place in the United States. And I think if you have stories to tell, even non-military stories, just your life stories and things, I would have been so thankful if my dad would have written some things down. Maybe he didn't want to talk about it, as men of his generation didn't. But I would have been so pleased to have found something, years later that would have, of his stories, of his life, of his feelings. That would have made such an important a part of my life to have known him a little bit better. So I really want to encourage anyone to just sit down. And if you can't sit down and write, a lot of people don't want to write, talking to a tape recorder, and just tape recorder, your family will appreciate this.
I agree 100%. Did your when you founded the writing group, or even as it grew, was there any sort of in addition to people telling their stories and sharing for, in particular, their families, which I'm a big advocate of, was there any sort of therapy element that you had in mind when you started this? I know when I've interviewed veterans, and often have been the first person to interview them, we get to the end of the interview and the person would not only say how much they had shared for the first time, but I could tell and sense that it had almost been like a therapy session for them. And all I did was sit there and write notes. Did you have that in mind when you started the group?
Well, we knew that was going to be probably a big aspect of it. Writing is therapeutic, but when we started this, there was still a lot of veterans, and we were working through Camp Pendleton mainly. We seem to get a lot of Marines. You're in Oceanside. That's the service that's up there, and then they were still coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, and we knew that might be an issue. We do not claim to be, therapists or anything like that. But as you say, Tom, you have an ear and you have a listening ear, and you take the time to listen to what they have to say. And we've had some tough cases that came in. This one young man, I don't know. We don't know what happened to him. He was really a brilliant writer, but he had a lot of issues, and drugs may have been one of them. But for the time that he was with us, he got something out of it. He was writing things down. He had these notebooks. And I think we helped in our own way of just offering him some compassion and understanding. And the group now has grown, because the more that you're with people, and especially with that military, and I don't know, maybe it is that camaraderie that they talk about, there is an understanding. It's a safe zone. And so they felt very comfortable sharing their stories. I was the outsider. I was the only non-military person there for the longest time, the only female. But for some reason, they took me in and they felt comfortable talking, because sometimes just talking is therapy, is good therapy. So we weren't always writing. It wasn't school, you were writing assignments and things like that. It was sharing. And, these men would shed a tear over some, a sad story, and I'm with your brother. And it's a very, a very good thing. I think writing brings out some of the best in people.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can't see everyone. Any other questions? Or else I have maybe one last question for Gail. Gail, what I get asked this, and sometimes it's horrible to be asked this, but do you know what your next project is going to be? You've had these, big book projects. I know what that means. You've had the long association with the writers group. Do you have anything on the horizon we can look forward to?
Oh, that's a good question. And I want to get to Mike too. Mike was raising his hand, but let me just say, I don't really have anything planned. This quarantine has kind of left, this would be a perfect opportunity, except I'm now having to homeschool my grandkids and that, but I don't really know what I want to do next. I kind of dabble, my options are open. If anybody has any good ideas, I would love to do something similar with Vietnam veterans, but even when I did this book, it was a couple of years, as you know, out of your life. I think I lost 15 pounds because I was just so focused on this. I was, just not being able to do anything else. But at this point, no, there's nothing definite coming in. And Mike, you had a question. Oh, unmute yourself. No, not yet. Space bar.
If you hold down the space bar, Mike, that'll work.
Ask a question while Mike, you're still muted.
Go ahead, Bill. Maybe he'll catch up.
I wanted to introduce Mark Sheehan, who is a friend of mine. We've met at the 4th Marine Division Association meeting in Camp Lejeune in 2015. Mark's father, as well as my father, both served in the 4th Marine Division. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark's father served under Archie Vandegrift. Is that correct, Mark?
That is correct.
Okay. I think Mark is doing a little writing, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe I'll turn it over to Mark if he has any questions. But I just had a quick question about Marines in Iceland. Actually, I believe it was prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor. My question is, your dad served in the 3rd Marine Division, and I only recall the 2nd Marine Division being sent to Iceland. So was there another regiment or another unit that was sent there? Or was your father in the 2nd Marine Division first and then switched over to the 3rd Marine Division?
Yes, he had shifted around quite a few with different divisions, but on Guam, Bougainville, and Iwo Jima, he was with the 3rd. But I think it was the 2nd division back on Iceland, the 3rd regiment of the 2nd division, something like that. But you know how the Marines shifts you around depending upon your MOS or something, where they need you.
Excuse
think
me,
that,
the,
growing up, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, was while my father was in the Marine Corps, my uncle was also in the Coast Guard, and he was an executive officer on one of the ships that were involved in the U.S. Coast Guard Greenland Patrol. So this was, I guess, something that not many people know about is that the Nazis had set up weather stations across the North Atlantic. So they knew when the weather was going to be good and shipping would be going through. So they could send out their wolf packs and try to destroy any U.S. convoys sending aid to England. So I grew up hearing a lot of these stories from my uncle in the Coast Guard. So thank you for your talk about Iwo Jima. That was
Oh, thank you. Thank you. PT.
Gail, I'm going to buy your book. And I'm
Thank
going to pass the word. I've done a couple stories, and you want to get your email, I'll send you mine. But I want you to know, one of my favorite old-fashioned movies, and I like old-fashioned movies, was a movie with John Payne and Sonia Henning, and he was a Marine unit in Iceland, and I think it was the 4th Marine Regiment, the guys that have been in China. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that's the unit, but there's a movie out with John. I think it's free on YouTube.
Oh, I'll look for it.
Wow, that's great. Do you recall the title, PT?
I could have it for you in a few minutes. There's another movie just came out, a 6-minute movie by Robert there that ought to be passed the word.
I think the 4th Marine Regiment was shipped to Corregidor, if I'm not mistaken, and they're the only regiment that had to correct their colors. But there could have been another offshoot of that was sent to Iceland.
Mike, did you get your microphone working?
It's working for me, but I don't think it's working for you guys.
No, it's working.
Oh, we hear
It's
you.
working.
Yeah.
You got to press the space bar.
No, you see, I can hear him.
Yeah, me too.
Me three.
Oh, Steve.
E4.
Steve says no.
Well, Mike texted in or typed in that he wanted to use the photo of the landing ship. Any of the photographs I have, you're welcome to. I will be happy to send them to you.
Thank you. Well, we have another published author on the call, Ray Elliott. And Ray, I hope you'll be our speaker one of these meetings. How does that sound?
That's fine.
Okay. And Mark, you're welcome to share your work with us. And for everybody, we meet at the same Zoom link every Wednesday at noon. And you're always welcome aboard. The first Wednesday of the month, we have a guest speaker like Gail today. But we meet every Wednesday. I don't know what day Christmas falls on this year. We'd probably take that Wednesday off. And you're all welcome for, the princely sum of $15 a year. You can join the Joe Rosenthal chapter. And you can all learn a bit more about what we do if you go to ussjoe.org. That's our website. And you'll learn that our principal project these days is trying to name a ship for Joe Rosenthal, who took the famous Iwo Jima picture. In another week or two, you'll see also that we're producing a series of Iwo Jima themed face masks, very high quality protective masks that we all need. And they should be out in ample time for Christmas presents. They're going to be $15 each, and soon to be collector's items. So if you have my info, or if you have Bob's info, who sent you invitation to the meeting, contact one of us. with questions on membership or on purchasing masks, and we'll get you to the right person to talk to. Okay. PT?
Update from the data bank. The name of the movie, I would have done better. The name of the movie is Iceland with Sonia Henson.
Oh,
Who was it?
imagine that.
John
Well-
Payne. John Payne is a very typical of a Marine. He's a very handsome guy. John Payne starred in 3 Marine movies. Can anybody tell me the other 2?
Is there a prize?
Yes, there is. You got a genuine Marine Corps Marathon turtleneck sweatshirt.
Wow. I'm not a real movie guy, so I'm not even going to try.
I'm sure that Gail knows the movies are To the Shores of Tripoli, where he played Lieutenant. Anybody know the lieutenant name he played? Come on. They got the sword. Okay, Lieutenant Presley O'Banion. And the other one is with Maureen O'Hara, and it's where he played. He was in boot camp in San Diego. Maureen O'Hara was a nurse, and that one's worth watching. 2 of them have Maureen O'Hara in them, and those are another. That's a good reason to watch both of them.
Okay. You know the title of the third one?
The let's see, I think it was To the Shores of Tripoli. Yeah, To the Shores of Tripoli.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
Well,
I protested the Marines coming because all the beer, all the liquor, everything was. They kind of had an American paycheck and they used up everything.
wow. Well, it's about time we draw our meeting to a close. Any last questions for Gail?
Great job.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you,
will.
Gail.
That was
Thank you.
wonderful.
I have Gail's book. It's terrific. And just as we heard her very short quotations today, each Marine she interviewed has a different story, a different take on things. We hear these statistics, 680 Marines were killed on the island. So many thousands, tens of thousands of Japanese defenders. Each one of these individuals is a person, a human being with a mom and dad and their own story. I'm with Gail 100%. These are stories that not only us senior citizens, but really everybody, should be writing down for their kids, grandkids, etc. So thank you, Gail, for that work. I have an idea how much time and work you put into that. And thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
And you're always welcome to join our meetings. They're usually not this interesting. But, we're here every Wednesday at noon. So thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for all your Zoom help today. And let's keep in touch, everybody, via email or some other way. Okay? Thank you so much. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.